A girl in Seattle started feeding the crows outside her house when she was 4 years old. Not because anyone told her to, not because she read about it or watched a video about it. She just started leaving food, bits of whatever she had, on the ledge outside the kitchen window where she could watch them come. By the time she was 8 years old, the crows were leaving things for her: a button, a bead, a piece of blue sea glass worn smooth at the edges, a small white plastic heart. A pearl-colored pendant she later said was her favorite thing she owned, not because of what it was, but because of who left it. Her mother documented everything, photographed the objects, kept them in a small box. By the time the story reached the internet, the collection had grown to dozens of items left over 4 years by the same group of crows who lived in the neighborhood around their house. This story made international news. It was shared millions of times, and almost every headline got it wrong. They called it proof that crows are generous, that crows feel gratitude, that crows love. Those headlines are not wrong exactly, but they are incomplete. And the real story, the one the science actually tells, is stranger and more specific and more remarkable than any of those headlines captured. Because what those crows were doing was not random. It was not instinctive. It was not even really about the objects. It was about her, specifically, individually, her face, her presence, her consistency, the relationship she had built without knowing she was building it. And understanding how that works, the actual mechanism underneath it, changes how you see every crow you will ever encounter for the rest of your life. Start here. Crows do not experience the world the way most birds do. Most birds operate within a relatively fixed behavioral range. They respond to stimuli. They follow seasonal patterns. They learn basic associations. They are not unintelligent, but they are not building individual models of the specific humans in their environment. Crows are. Every crow in a given territory maintains what researchers describe as an individual social map, a continuously updated internal record of the specific animals and humans in its world. Not humans as a category, not feeders as a category, individual faces, individual behavioral patterns, individual histories. You are an entry in that map. You have been since the first time a crow in your neighborhood saw you. What that entry contains depends entirely on what you have done. For most people, the entry is neutral: observed, filed, no strong signal in either direction. For people who feed crows who return to the same spot at the same time with food, the entry starts to change. Consistency is the first thing, not volume of food, not variety. Consistency. The crow needs to build a predictive model of you, to understand that when you appear, food follows. That you are a reliable feature of its environment, rather than a random event. This process takes roughly 1 to 2 weeks, which is why researchers say that 7 days of consistent feeding is the threshold at which crow behavior toward a specific person begins to meaningfully change. After that threshold, something shifts. The crow begins to anticipate. Not just respond, anticipate. It starts appearing before you arrive, positioning itself near the feeding spot ahead of your usual time, watching the door, watching the window, updating its prediction each day based on what happened the day before. This is not a trained behavior. Nobody rewarded the crow for arriving early. It developed the anticipation on its own because its brain is built to find patterns and act on them ahead of time. Now, here is where it gets more complicated. Crows are not loners. They live in family groups with complex social structures. A mated pair will often be accompanied by offspring from previous years who help raise new young, a behavior so unusual in the animal kingdom that it has its own name: cooperative breeding. These family groups share information constantly, which means when one crow in a family group builds a model of you, the others update their models too. The crow that first learned you were safe and consistent communicates that to its family. The crow that learned your schedule shares it. The crow that first received something positive from you, a response, an acknowledgement, a look, that information moves through the group. You didn't just build a relationship with one crow, you built one with a family. Now let's talk about the gifts, because this is where most people's understanding stops at the surface. And the surface is not where the interesting part lives. Researcher John Marsluff at the University of Washington, the same researcher who ran the caveman mask experiments, first seriously investigated crow gifting in the early 2000s after collecting dozens of accounts that were too specific and too consistent to dismiss. A button on a feeder, a coin placed exactly where food had been, a small piece of jewelry sitting in a spot that had been empty the day before. His first instinct was skepticism. His second instinct, after reading enough accounts, was to take it seriously, because the accounts shared three features that coincidence couldn't explain. First, the objects were placed in the exact location where food had been left. Not near it, not beside it, in it. Second, the objects were almost always shiny, metallic, reflective, glass or foil, or polished stone. Third, the behavior appeared only in crows that had been fed consistently for an extended period, not in crows encountering a person for the first time, not in crows receiving food unpredictably, only in crows that had built a stable, long-term model of a specific human. Here is how it starts. Crows are naturally curious about objects. They pick things up, constantly investigating, testing, carrying. They often lose interest mid-flight and drop what they were carrying. If a crow happens to drop something near a feeding spot, and the human there reacts visibly, picks it up, examines it, gets excited, puts out extra food, the crow just received a signal it did not expect. Leaving an object near this human caused a positive response, stronger than the usual response, different from the usual response. That signal gets filed, that association gets encoded, and over time, over weeks and months of reinforcement, the accidental drop becomes a deliberate placement. The crow begins choosing objects intentionally, carrying them to the feeding spot specifically, setting them down carefully in the exact location. Researcher Kaylee Swift, who has spent more time studying crow social behavior than almost anyone alive, offers an important clarification here. She does not believe crows are giving gifts in the way humans give gifts. The intention, she argues, is probably more about producing a known positive response than about generosity as an abstract concept. But she also says this: the distinction between those two things may be smaller than we assume. Because here is what is also true. The objects crows choose to bring are almost universally objects the crow itself finds valuable. Shiny things, reflective things, objects that catch light. Researchers believe crow attraction to reflective objects has deep evolutionary roots, possibly connected to identifying water sources from a distance, where reflection signals the presence of something vital. In crow terms, shiny things are not trash, they are treasure. Which means, when a crow brings you a piece of foil or a piece of glass or a small polished stone, it is not bringing you something random. It is bringing you something from its own category of valuable things. That is a different statement than generosity. It is in some ways a more remarkable one. The crow is not giving you something it doesn't care about. It is giving you something it does. Now here is the part of this story that the headlines almost never reach. The most documented and most striking gifting cases do not involve random shiny objects. They involve specific things. Lost earrings turning up on feeders days after going missing. A house key appearing in a feeding spot after the owner spent a week looking for it. Personal items, items that had been near the feeding area, items the crow had observed the human handling or searching for reappearing exactly where food was left. Scientists are honest about the limits of this data. The sample size is small. Controlled replication is nearly impossible. Coincidence cannot be fully ruled out in individual cases. But the specificity, the precision of placement, the nature of the objects, the timing follows a pattern that is difficult to explain without crediting the crow with something close to intentional return. Something close to, I found this near you. I thought you might want it back. There are also documented cases of crow gifting escalating over time. Early gifts are simple: a pebble, a bottle cap, a twist of foil. Over months, the gifts become more varied, more specific. Researchers who have studied long-term gifting relationships describe a progression that mirrors, imperfectly but unmistakably, the way human gift-giving deepens in a long relationship. Early on, you give something generic. Over time, you give something that reflects what you know about the person. The crow that left the pearl-colored pendant for the girl in Seattle had been watching her for 4 years. It knew her face, it knew her schedule, it knew her yard. It knew, in whatever way a crow knows anything, that she was the specific person this object should go to. That is not instinct. That is a relationship. And here is the final thing. The thing that I think matters most and gets said least. Not everyone who feeds crows receives gifts. Most people don't. Some people feed crows for years and never find anything on their feeder that wasn't food. Researchers have tried to understand what separates those people from the ones who receive gifts. The findings are not clean, but they point in a consistent direction. Acknowledgement. The people who receive gifts are overwhelmingly the people who look at the crows, not just glance at them, look at them, make eye contact, respond when the crow is present. Treat the crow not as a bird that visits the feeder, but as an individual that has arrived. The crow is not just watching to see if food appears, it is watching to see if it has been seen. There is something in that observation that is hard to sit with and harder to dismiss, because it suggests that what the crow is building, through the consistency, through the anticipation, through the gifts, is not just a feeding strategy. It is a connection, one that requires something from both sides, one that deepens when both sides show up, one that can apparently last for years, survive seasons, outlast individual birds as the behavior passes to younger family members who inherit both the territory and the relationship. The girl in Seattle grew up. The crows outside her window changed. New ones, younger ones, the children and grandchildren of the original birds. And the gifts kept coming. Because she kept showing up. Because she kept looking. Because from the very beginning, when she was 4 years old and didn't know what she was doing, she treated them like they mattered. And they noticed. Leave food at the same spot at the same time every day for 7 days. Then on day 8, don't just put the food down and walk away. Stay for a moment. Look at the crow when it arrives. Let it see that you see it. Come back and tell me what changes. I read everyone.